Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. We're back at Autoshack and we are back on the Caddy project once again. We've been flying through the jobs on this. We've got the engine in, we've got the engine bay pretty well mocked up now. We've got the air suspension on, but one thing we do need to do is to fuel this engine. Because this was originally a diesel Caddy van, there's no electronic fuel pump, there's no swirl pot in the tank. So we have got to convert this to petrol ready with something that can supply the 1.8 litre 20 valve turbo that came out of the Audi TT. We do many of these conversions with older carburettor cars. Converting them to injection, we need a swirl pot, we need a high pressure fuel pump, and for that we always go to our friends at Torx, and today we have had a delivery. So the start of the problems in the fuel system is the tank. In the Mk1 there was never any true electronic fuel injection. They were all petrol carburetted, or mainly in the Caddy they were all diesels, and in the Caddy itself there's only one tank option. It's just an empty tank. All it has in the top is a fuel sender. There's no electronic pumps, and all they have in the bottom, it comes down to a bit of a V, so there's a sump in the bottom, and that's where it takes its pickup from. So with a carb or a diesel, they only run at a few PSI, and it's a mechanical pump at the front that sucks it through. There's enough volume in the pipes that it doesn't matter. When you go around the corner, the fuel swashes to one side, uncovers the pickup. They don't really mind too much. When you go to electronic fuel injection, that causes a problem. For starters, the electronic fuel injection pumps aren't very good suckers. So any bit of air that they suck in really upsets them, then they struggle to prime. The other thing, carburetted petrols run at 2 or 3 PSI, whereas fuel injection runs at 40 to 50 PSI. So any dip in that pressure makes a big difference at the front. So what they did on the GTIs is they put an electronic lift pump in the top, and then next to the pump, they had this little box as like a reserve. So the little pump in the top would fill up this small tank, so it wouldn't matter if it squashes around, because it's all self-contained next to it, and they'd always keep the fuel injection pump submerged in fuel. The GTI setups are available secondhand, but they're very old now, very unreliable, and these plastic tanks do crack a lot. So we're gonna kind of replicate that today, but with some much better parts. And a big box of bits from Torx. Have a look. And here are all our bits. We always use Torx fittings for all of our builds. They're great quality, all anodised, and you can get any combination you want of AN sizes, angles, adapters. They supply everything. So we've got a facet red top lift pump. This will be what will be lifting from the fuel tank itself, because it hasn't got a swirl pot, into our external swirl pot. These are AN8 fittings. These have got great sucking capabilities, and that's in AN8. So that will look like that. Then that will go to the swirl pot, which is this AN8 fitting. And this is our swirl pot. So you may remember this from the Mark II build. We use this on the white Mark II Golf. Sometimes you have an external swirl pot, and then you use that as a reservoir to feed your main pump. The good thing about these is the fuel pump actually sits inside it. So the fuel pump is always submerged, because these don't have much scavenging capabilities. So like this, that bolts up underneath, and the pump is always submerged. The problem with that, these are designed for a Bosch 044, a really common motorsport pump, but they have since discontinued, and the Bosch replacement is smaller, so that won't fit in our swirl pot. So what Torx recommended, Syntec do a HP 3044, which is an 044 replacement, and this is the direct replacement for the 044. So everything that used to bolt to an 044 will bolt to this. So this will sit inside perfectly. It's the right size to go in there, and all our fittings will go onto it. In here it has a check valve, because like I said, there's no scavenging capabilities in this, so if this empties when the engine's turned off, it really struggles to prime itself. So you have a check valve on the end, but that just goes to a barb fitting normally. So Torx do this built-in check valve that bolts directly onto the end and has an AN fitting on this end. So we always use these straight in, so you don't have joiner hose, joiner hose, joiner hose. You can just have all in one. And then for the other end, to sit inside our swirl pot, we have this filter which screws on the bottom. So that sits inside the tank, and anything that does get through will be filtered by this sock on the end, and it's got a big spring in it, so it can't suck itself through. The facet pump has a removable filter in the bottom, so when it sucks it in out of the tank itself, that'll go in here, be filtered before it gets into the swirl pot. But any debris from the lines or from the injectors, anywhere at all, won't go through our main one, because it has this sock on the bottom. Then we've got an assortment of different AN fittings, and then we've got all these hose clamps at the bottom. So these are what we use to run down the car. we bolt them to the bottom and that holds it perfectly. And then we got a line, I think we've got 10 meters of AN6 and then a meter of AN8, and that will go to our tank. So it looks like we have got everything. Also, on here, these are just barbed fittings. So we've got the AN equivalent to go in there, so the AN will come straight to here. So we will be fully AN'd up, no chance of anything popping off. These are for converting the fuel rail to AN. In here, it's just like a radiator in your house for connecting hard lines. So we chop the barb off the fuel line, and then they have just a little olive to go over, and then that converts the fuel lines to AN as well. So then we can put an AN line directly on the fuel rail. I had to take the paint off this fuel pump because there's such a tight tolerance to get it to slot in that I just had to use a bit of thinners on it, and lucky I did, because this isn't supposed to be submerged. It wasn't petrol safe paint, so it would have all gone gummy in there and then blocked up the end. So I've got all that off and just taken all the fittings off because we're not going to use the barb ones, so they just unscrew. Then we've got an AN6 which is return from the rail. Another AN6 which is return to the fuel tank, and then an AN8 which will go to our lift pump. That'll be the intake. So you undo these, that comes off, and then I won't put the filter on yet, but the filter will go on the bottom, and this slots in there and it bottoms out on the ridge of the fuel pump. So that goes down, bottoms out, that bolts on there. And then the standard style Bosch check valve is meant for a banjo, like on the Cosworth, but that unscrews. This is just a one-way check valve. And the Torx one goes straight in. So now we're all assembled with all our AN fittings, and all assembled. This looks mega. Almost a shame to hide it underneath, but let's find a space for it. I'll put the tank back in so we know how much room we've got to deal with, and we've got a nice little pocket up here. So what I plan is to weld a bar in, and that's going to sit up there, and then hopefully we can fit the lift pump beside it. I just need a kind of a bar welded in at the top to mount them top bits on, and then the plan is to fit that in the corner beside it. So we'll have the swell pot here, that one will sit in there, and that goes to the tank. There's the lift pump bolted up, and hopefully we'll have room next to it. Ah, perfect. And then that fitting will go to there. It's made to measure. All clears. Need to make some brackets. Right, I think I've got a bit of a plan. Got some rubber mounts in. So then that bolts on there, and that'll be isolated because these are a bit noisy, a bit buzzy. So that'll sit in there. And I think I've got some small box section. If I can weld a couple of rails up there, I think I can make the mounts for the swell pot. And we can weld them in and maybe put a bracket up as well. So I think that's going to work out. Let's get fabricating. A little riv nut. So with the riv nuts in there, that just gives it a thread, which allows me to screw these in. Like that. So with a bit of chopping and a couple of riv nuts, we can now screw these in to the bar. So they screw into the riv nuts there. And then we've got our mounts on here. That will fit in there and there. So this will be nice and isolated as well because it has got a pump hard mounted in it. So I'll put some nuts on, get the two in there, get them on, and then try it in the car. Quick bit of weld-free primer on the top, because once it's up there, we're not going to be able to paint that, and I don't want that showing any rust. So now that's dry, let's see if it all fits. And on. That'll keep it nice and sturdy, because with that pumping, it's surprising how heavy all this is, and it's going to be full of fuel as well. That should be nice and quiet. Let's try it in the car. Slot it up in there. Oh, that is going to be perfect. That is perfect. Right, let's get this on so we can see whereabouts we want it, and then I'll tack them in. Right, we're up in here. Not sure how well you can see anything, but I think we're going to all fit in. This top one here is going to go to the top one there, so it's going to be a really short pipe. This bottom one will come round to the tank there. This one will go to the rail. This one will be the return, and that one will be the return to the tank. So everything fits in there nice. And it's going to work nicely because this is the filter. So you twist that off, the bottom comes off, and there's a filter in there. So that's perfect for serviceability. So yeah, I think that's all going to fit in there nice. I could probably reach up and put a couple of tacks in with the welder, because all this is new, so it's not got any fuel in it yet. Just to get it in the right place, drop it down and weld it on better. But I think this is going to work perfectly. Well, we are tacked in, no fires, so now I can unbolt it and weld them in properly. That's going to hold on there nice. So another thing to watch out for when you're welding in brackets, make sure you can still unbolt it afterwards. But this should drop straight out. All in the planning. And out it comes. Get that welded in. It's on. And all welded on. That is certainly not going anywhere. So I was thinking about putting another bracket at this end because it's like a bit of an overhang. But that does seem solid on there. There's no movement in these at all. No bending of the little chassis, so it's bridged nicely in there. Happy with those welds. They are well on there. I suppose there is a super on test we could do. Will they take a super on? Ready? Oh. Yeah, that's a pass. And there it is, all bolted up on its mounts. And that all fits in there nicely. It's nowhere near the ground, so we've got loads of clearance there. So these will all fit down nicely. The only one that's a little bit close, get that out of the way, is this one. Ideally, to meet up with this, is hitting this. You can kind of see where they align. So what I could do is move this down more, because we've still got, obviously, plenty of room before we reach the bottom of the car. If we move this down to, say, the lip, that'll just make this all line up a lot nicer. Happy with that, let's carry on. And back around the front, we need to convert the fuel rail to AN as well, because at the minute they're just normal rubber hoses go on and a Jubilee clips on, but we want these as AN fittings. So we have got the compression fittings. We can't put them on the end here. We need to move up here a bit. These two will be going. We don't need them anymore. So I'll get the rail off and then we can chop these and put our fittings on. The loom just clips off nice and easy, and there's just two Allen keys to take the rail off. One, two. Take the vacuum off the fuel pressure regulator. It should pop out with the injectors attached. And the loom actually goes through the rail, which is a bit annoying. I just tilted the rail a bit, and the fuel that came out was bright green, so I think that's been in there a long time. Let's see if any is left. That's not fuel colour. So I think we'll give these injectors a clean. We've got our machine here. I think that'll be a good idea. There's the injectors all out, so we'll give them a clean. And here is our conversion fittings. So it's just like a radiator in your house, has these olives, but because the fuel line's got these kind of barbs on the end, these won't go. And then they have the spot weld in here, so we tend to cut them here and here, and then we can go AN and then put our whichever fitting we want. Because they're at different angles, we normally do 190 and this one at 150, and that takes them to the same angle. So we've just got to chop that off. See ya. That's the end off. Cleaned up in there. So now put our fitting on. Put our olive on. Put our end on. And it's just a case of doing them up, clamping it. And that is AN done. Do that up a few turns. That is on there. Same with the other one. Then we can screw our AN fittings on there, just where we want them. And there's the rail all back on, converted to AN fittings. So it all goes back in its original place, but now instead of a barb on the end, it's got the AN, which means they just screw on like that. And when they're done up, they look super cool. Got the nice Torx logo on the top as well, and then they'll run down to where the fuel lines come up right down there. And then, now you've seen how you convert them to the hard line, I've got another one, but a slightly bigger size. I think this is a 10mm, to get rid of this coolant hard line. This is the one that goes around to the turbo at the back there, comes round and usually joins into the header tank, but this gets in the way and it just looks ugly. If everything else flushed, we don't want that sticking out. So what I'm going to do is put this one, if we can see where it goes in, so behind the boost pipe here, right in there, I'll put that one in so we can convert this to AN and then just run a hose round to join in with the rest of the system. And then all that will be down this side is just those fuel lines. That is going to look pucker. So much like the wiring, now we've got our to and from place, we can now connect the dots. So we can start making lines. The good thing about having these built-in filters and having the fuel pump inside the swirl pot, there's not really that many lines, because usually you come out of the pump, through a filter, through another line, to a swirl pot, out the swirl pot, to the pump, and round to the front. But really, from these, we've just got to go from the lift pump to the tank, which is right here, and then the lines just need to go to the fuel rail on the front. We're going to carry on down the factory channel. We've got those really neat billet little separators that will screw along here, and that'll keep it nice and safe and out the way and go to the correct location. So next up, I think I'm going to make the fuel lines up. These are all the AN fittings that you assemble yourself. I've already made up the AN8 one there because I wanted to make sure that does fit and clear the chassis leg, which it does perfectly. So we've got a line here, and this is the PTFE line, fuel line. So it's got this plastic PTFE inner, and then the braided, and then the black hose. And the good thing about this, it doesn't give any fuel smell out because it is all contained. So these are safe to use inside your car. They won't be running inside for this. And the old drawback about these is they didn't really bend very well. You couldn't get around tight radiuses, but they've just brought out a new version and it does seem to bend really well. These are nice and easy to assemble. They're 3-piece. So you've got the inner, the middle, and then the top. And these have got a little step inside it. And what you have to do is get this silver bit slotted in between the braid and the PTFE. So it goes on, you have to push it in, and then all the braid comes out around it, and then it's clamped on by this piece. And then when it's all screwed up together, there's no chance of this being pulled out. So let's make a start and see how far we can get. We're going to follow the factory route going down the car because there's a nice protected channel that goes down. But as standard, they have the plastic fuel lines that clip into these. So although we're going to follow the route, we're not going to use these because our braided line won't fit in there. So what we use is the separators. These are for running 2 pipes next to each other, and they just keep them at a nice distance. But what we do is we take out the little tiny screw in the middle, drill all the way through, and then we put them up there and put a bolt all the way through. So nicely protected, very secure. Then usually we just put a little riv nut along. So these will be running all the way to the front. I'll probably space them out the same as standard because that worked well. And then we only need to get to our fuel pump there. So our first one coming out the pump is going to be this 150-degree one. So I'll start with that and put that on the end as our start point. We take apart our 3 pieces, the end, that and that. You can get proper AN jaws for the vise that clamp these perfectly. And we do a lot of these, so we should really get some, but if anyone fancies sponsoring us, we could do with some AN jaws. Get him rested in there. Then we get our hose. And now you've got to remember to put this on first. Otherwise, when you put that in, this splays out and you can't get this on. Much like a brake line, don't forget. So now we can take our tape off. We always tape it off when we cut it, because that also stops it from flaring out. And then you just got to carefully get this in between the plastic and the braid without spiking your fingers. And once you just get it started, it just takes a good whack and then they start flaring out. So you just get it started in there and a few taps in. And in there's a little step so you know how far the PTFE has to come in until it stops. See, that's on the end there. This is all flared out. So when we bring our thing in, that's going to clamp it together. And we put it on. Snug. And then it's just a case of doing the 2 up. The other problem with AN fittings, it is imperial. So we have to use adjustables on them because metric spanners don't fit. Again, you can get proper AN wrenches, but they're not exactly cheap and we don't use them a lot. But if Torx ever want to sponsor us, we'll gladly take the tools. Started on there, making sure we haven't got any stray braid. And then we can do it up. If we flip it over, up till it's nice and tight. And then you have your first AN fitting. And if you're careful with the adjustable spanners, you don't leave any marks or anything. So we'll put this one on and then that'll be our starting point. So I've just fished that down from the top. Screw it into our pump. Over there, and then that'll start rolling this side. Out of the 2, I'm probably going to put it this side because this is the one that's going to be the return and that can swirl down that side. So let's start screwing these in so we can get our exact length. I've just took them apart. So as you can see, the top one screws into the bottom one. They've got a little thread in there. These are tiny little screws. They must be like M2 or something. So what we do, drill them out and we just put an M5 all the way through, both sides, clamps it up. And then we'll just put some riv nuts in here, going along, and that will secure them in place. Just a 5mm hole, nice and easy, only aluminium. And the 5mm fits through. Put it on another one that I drilled, and that'll go into a riv nut in the floor. A nice belt and braces job. Put our riv nut on in the hole and squeeze. There's our threaded hole. And there they all are in their riv nuts. So that'll do up and then they'll hold on tight like that. So it runs down exactly the same as the old one. I ground off the original nubs so they're not in the way. Then just go about an X prime. So now let's pull this fuel line down. There it is, all clipped on. And you can get really nice radiuses with this new hose. So it sits in there and disappears up. And we're nice and safe, well out of harm's way. So now let's go up the top and measure up where we're going to chop. We've got all our excess coming up through. And this is the feed coming from our pump. So we want this on the feed line of the rail. So we're putting our 90 on there. And we're going to want this and kind of tuck in nice and tight like that. Cut these, we use a grinder. Like I said earlier, we put a bit of tape around it to stop it fraying out. There. Nice clean cut. Try that one on. Now I think before I finalise this one, I'm just going to run this one as well so we can make sure they're all really nice and close together. So we'll get the return done and back and then put the ends on if it's all alright. And I've just labelled it as well because it's easy to get confused when you've got lots of black pipes. And same again, we're starting with a 90 this time. Something I forgot to say on the other one is I do just put a little bit of grease on the threads. Just makes them pull in a little nicer. Just a little bit. And then it's all the same again. Putting our end on, tape off, putting our cap on between the braid and the plastic. Tap that on, down to its little shoulder in there. That's where you stop, pop it on, screw it up. Another one done. Let's get this on. And all on, going all the way back to the swell pot and the pump. So you've got the feed and return. And I put a separator in here just to keep them nice, and that's what they're meant to be for. Just to keep them a nice equal distance. But with our bolts, they will work really well as holders, goes through the factory hole. And I'll just put another one there to keep it nice and tidy past everything. Got loads of room there past the rack. So let's finish this one off at the top. I've managed to sneak one more riv nut and clip down there. So that's now nice and secure, all up away from everything. And that comes round. Got a separator here. And that's going to go to there. So I've marked it where I need to cut it and look good. So let's cut this one off and then we can get our fittings on. Perfect. And on the inside, you can see where the riv nuts pull through. So you can see they've got the little skirt around the bottom. We can trim these bolts down because obviously we don't want them sticking through the carpet. But in here, they have this thick sound deadening. So they just kind of disappear into that so you don't get little bumps in the carpet. But you can see where we're attached. That goes under the seat. Should be right to the back. So they will just disappear in the padding of the carpet so you won't get big humps in there because they barely push through. And now under here, all we're left with is the two to the tank. So we've got the feed, which will go to the lift pump. And then the return from the top of the swell pot will go back into the tank on this one. So we've just got two little short ones to do and we'll be all plumbed in. A little problem I'm finding with this PTFE line is I'm trying to Jubilee it onto the fuel tank, but because it's so hard, it doesn't actually Jubilee closed. So I found some non-PTFE AN8 here from a previous build, but for them you do need slightly different fittings. Because we haven't got the liner, you have a different fitting for them, which we've got them in stock from a previous build. So these ones come off, and there's no centerpiece on these because there's no PTFE line to go around. These just kind of clamp it like a mushroom. So you put this one straight on. Let's take this little bit of tape off. Again, we take these to stop all the braid splaying out. And then you just put these two together. And that's got a little taper in it. So when this is on, and you just tap that in until it reaches the little step, much like the other fitting. Then when this screws in, that just splays it outwards and locks it into the outer. So we'll get these connected up and then that'll be our feed. And then we can Jubilee that to the tank, no problem. There's our fitting on, all ready to go. And there's the big AN8 feed to the lift pump, all in. I'm gonna get some big P-clips so that attaches to there, so that'll be nice and secure. And then they're just gonna be Jubileed onto the tank. So now we are fully plumbed up. We come out of the tank, into the lift pump. We've got the filter at the bottom there, we can change on the service schedule. Goes up, out the top of the pump, and that fills up the swell pot on the right hand side there. The swell pot is then filled all the way up, and then we've got our internal pump, which then feeds it out of the middle, all the way down the rail, all the way up to the fuel rail at the top, through the fuel pressure regulator, and back out the return, all the way back again. And that one goes into the top of the swell pot on the left there. And then when the swell pot is full, that then returns out of the middle one, back to the tank. So now we are fully plumbed in. I'm really, really happy with how this has come out. It's really neat and tidy. Everything is self-contained in this corner, well away from the exhaust on the other side. well away from any moving components and all nicely where the fuel pipes come in and out of the tank. So it couldn't have worked out better. The packaging is really small with this pump in the swirl pot. Also cuts down on pipe work and fittings. Everything is neat and tidy, and most importantly, very, very safe. So we've just got the wiring to take care of next. So the main lift pump just has 2 terminals which we put rings on, and that'll go to the fuel pump relay. The lift pump is just a single wire circuit because it actually earths on the body of the pump. So because we're rubber mounted, we need to run a little earth point to the body, and that'll be all taken care of. Everything is mounted, everything is cut to length, so I'm happy now we can take all this off. Because of course we are still in the mock-up process, so now we can take all this out. Also what we'll do is we'll blow out all the lines, because where we cut the ends off there might be little bits of dust or anything in there, so we'll blow all them out first before we run any fuel through it. But for the fuel system, we are now finished, so I can take all this back out and that'll be ready all to be painted and stone chipped up where welded them brackets in. So with the fuel system done, that is another tick off the list of things this needs to run. Everything is made up, all the lines are cut to size, all the brackets are made, we know where everything is going to run. So this is why we always do the mock-up system, and it works out really well for us. So I'm going to strip all this back out, put it somewhere safe, ready for the final rebuild. And I know it's something I'm not going to have to worry about when we're trying to delicately go around all the fresh paint in the bay. I know all the holes are drilled, everything is run where it needs to be, riv nuts are in, so it'll be a case of just putting them in, screwing them onto the rail, and job done. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. You guys still seem to be loving the Caddy project just as much as me. We're getting quite a playlist going on it, and that's down in the description if you want to catch up all ready for the next episode, which I think will probably be the next practical thing we need to work on, and that is the radiator and the intercooler. So we've got that underway. That'll be next week. Make sure you tune in. Make sure you give this video a like. But until then, make sure you have fun.